It's weird to have on real clothes and be in here. That's so true.
It is. How's everybody doing? Happy Sunday. All right, so I think I know pretty much everybody here. Michelle, we've met several times. And there's a few other people who couldn't make it today, who you guys will see in the group chat on the Slack channel. Just so you know, Susan Griffin, who some of you guys know, a couple other people who aren't members of the gym as well. You'll see the name Joy Graves and Nick Brodeur, which I actually think he's coming to this. He's going to be a little late, and a couple others. But welcome to the Nutrition MasterClass Kickoff. We are super excited to get started, and I just wanted to welcome you all and then talk about how you can be successful as a part of the Nutrition Masterclass. So before we do that, we're going to go around. I want everyone to quickly say your name, and if there's one food that you could choose that would not count for calories, what would it be? Quickly.
Chris Brownies.
All right.
Megan Bray beer.
All right.
Nicole Poirier. Oh my gosh. Oh, maybe tequila. Brittany ice cream.
Oh.
CJ pasta.
John beer.
Samantha candy.
Cameron, I'm gonna follow the same trend as a lot of people beer.
Yeah.
Or yeah, similar wine.
We need to have a different class.
Maybe we need to circle up.
Rob.
Rochelle Harwell ice cream.
Chloe Fernando ice cream.
Danny White, bourbon.
Oh.
Mike Muscati pizza.
I'm Abby. I'm going to say ice cream as well. Jenny's ice cream, to be exact.
Yeah, Joe, I'll say beer. Sure. All right. Cool. So I sent this out in an email, so maybe some of you guys have seen this. You guys all have a folder that has this little packet in it. Same thing I sent in the email. There's also a couple blank sheets of paper in there that we'll use in a little bit. But how to get the most out of the masterclass. So first of all, our mission at CrossFit Spring Hill is to help people achieve their health and fitness goals. And the foundation of that really is nutrition. You could throw some other things in there like sleep and recovery, but nutrition is going to get you a lot of the results that you want. I wish I could say that you could just come in here and train and that would get you everything you want, but it's like a bicycle with two wheels. They both have to be on there in order for the bike to run. So we wanted to provide this program. We've done things kind of like this before, but the intention of this one is really to empower you, educate you, and keep you accountable with some structure to get on track with your nutrition goals, so that it's not just like a challenge where it's a temporary thing, but it's something you can learn from and know the right knobs to turn going forward for how to get on track on your own. And even if you know how to get on track, something like this is still very valuable just for the accountability and structure of it. So I know some of you probably know the right things to do. It's just a matter of having the accountability to do it. So glad you're here. How to get the most out of this. This is my little acronym I'm pretty proud of. Most out of the masterclass. M, mindset. So just like with physical training, there's no magic hack to avoid the short-term discomfort that leads to long-term results. So I wish I could say you could have your cake and eat it too. And there are some little tips and things we can give you to show you how you can still enjoy some things like beer and wine and hit your goals. But at the end of the day, it does require sacrifice, and just embrace the challenge. Enjoy the process. I was talking to John about this the other day, and he had a really good analogy of like always thinking about your end result is like a coach just yelling the score out at the team. It's 14-10. It's 14-10. We need 4 more points. Come on. Instead of focusing on the process of how to get there and enjoying it while you're at it, enjoying learning how to go through that process. Regardless of what has or hasn't worked for you in the past, have a beginner's mindset in this. I know a lot of you guys have probably tried things in the past that you feel like, well, this worked for me or this didn't work. Try to have a beginner's mindset and just be willing to try new things. O for ownership. Again, just taking ownership that as amazing as our coaches are, who I'll introduce in a moment, they can't do the work for you. And at the end of the day, you will get out of this what you put into it. I'm currently in a business mentoring program that is 10 times as expensive as this. And my mindset in that is it's worth what I get out of it. If I don't feel like I get the value out of it, it's my fault. And we're going to, believe me, we're going to do everything we can to provide tons of value, but at the end of the day, you have to do the work. Support other members, so that we are going to have this online Slack group that Abby's going to talk a little more about. You will get more out of this if you're interactive in that group, chatting with other people, sharing tips, asking questions. So support other members that way, participate in the online group discussions, ask the coaches questions. That's what they're here for. Like, that's a lot of the value you're getting, is just being able to have access to them. Take action. You actually have to do the work. And even if you just implement one or two of the tactics that you learn in the MasterClass going forward, doing one thing consistently for the next 10 years, if that's just getting adequate protein, will change your outcome, okay? So prioritize the coaching calls, take action to move things around in your schedule if you need to. The coaching calls are every Sunday at 4 p.m. And follow through on the weekly commitments, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But some of the weekly commitments will tell you what you're going to do that week. Some of them, especially if you're sticking around for the full 12 weeks, you'll start to choose your own weekly commitments and take some ownership of that. Okay? So we're excited for you. And without further ado, I'll introduce John first, because Abby's actually going to lead most of the rest of the workshop. But Jonathan Poirier, a lot of you guys know John. Welcome, John. Everyone say hi.
Hey, yeah, I'm John. I know most of y'all.
Yeah. So John has been nutrition coaching with us for, 4 or 5 months, but been in the nutrition space for a long time. And, the accolades and certificates and things like that, here's a little tip for you that most of you guys have probably figured out. Just because someone has some of that stuff behind their name doesn't mean they're good at what they do.
Yep.
But John has the CrossFit nutrition certification and precision nutrition coaching certification, and he's just really freaking good at what he does.
Yes.
And really good guy. And both Abby and John and all of our coaches, we wouldn't have them work with us if they weren't really good at what they do and really good people that we would want to spend a lot of our time with. So welcome, John. Everybody say thank you, John. Yeah. Anything else you want to say, John?
No, I'm good. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. And then I'll go ahead and introduce Abby, and she'll take over from here. So Abby, same deal. She is our lead nutrition coach. She has been she's actually the first member of CrossFit Spring Hill. Yeah, member number 1. And started nutrition coaching with us pretty shortly after. So for almost 3 years, she's been doing nutrition coaching with us, has helped a lot of you in the past, has helped me, and we've developed a lot of our programs together. And again, Abby has more certifications than I actually am aware of, but she precision nutrition, a bunch of other stuff. But like I said, her experience and expertise is seriously like better than anything you're going to get almost anywhere else. She's amazing what she does. So you guys are in a good place. All right. So let's welcome Abby. Woo!
Yay.
Abby's going to take over.
Absolutely. I'm selfishly super happy for John. I've been sort of solo. I mean, obviously I've had Joe, but to have like an official counterpart to help me with all of this has been wonderful. And I'm excited to actually, this is our first one that we're like formally leading together. And so we really are tag teaming this. So you're going to hear a lot from me today. I am going to call on him to like add in some stuff as we're talking, but we're sort of going to alternate. Like he'll teach, especially again, if you're with us for the full 12 weeks, like 1 week, it may be me teaching, 1 week it will be him teaching. So we'll really be tag teaming the entire part together. So you're going to get to hear a lot from both of us, even though today I will be doing a lot of the talking. So this is just quickly about the agenda, but we're just going to jump right in. So the first thing is a little bit boring, but I do want to pause. So just by show of hands, how many of you have ever engaged with Slack, like for your job or anything else? Okay, so a few people have before. How many so show of hands, never used it before at all? Okay, awesome. So it isn't anything like super fancy, but there's just a couple of things I wanted to point out that will make your Slack experience better or worse. And so I actually am going to flip over and just bring Slack up here. So hold on here, make this larger. So a couple of things. Oh, Megan, I see you've joined. So a couple of things in Slack. So it does have a desktop version and an app version. So I would encourage you, make sure you have the app on your phone if you've not already done that, but you can, like access it just via the web. Right now, there's not a lot in the channel because, again, today is like our first official kickoff. But there's a couple of things I want you to pay attention to. So first and foremost, the most important thing is if somebody makes a post, well, let's say John or I post something, and you are going to comment to us, like you're adding on to that conversation, I always want you to use what's called the thread button. So what that's going to look like is if I was going to comment on this post that Joe had posted, do y'all see this little bubble that says reply in thread? I know that's kind of tiny, but it looks like a little thought bubble up there in the upper right-hand corner. Do y'all see that? Threading is the number one most important thing about Slack. If you don't thread, it gets very busy and disorganized. And so just remember, if I am adding on to the conversation that somebody else has started, I should always be threading. I should never be down here at the bottom starting a new post, okay? So it's pretty straightforward, but threading is first and foremost. Just like, if you've used Facebook or social media, you can tag people specifically by doing @ and start to type their name. You can tag me or John if you've got a question pointed directly at us. You also can private message people, not only us, but you also can private message each other. And so you can do that over here on the left-hand side where it says direct messages, and I can click that button and I can say, like, I'm going to send Mike a message, right? So you have that feature as well. The other thing I want to point out is, let me get back to where I was. Hold on. I've gotten myself, hold on, let me get out of my messages here. I've gotten myself stuck. Hold on a second. Why am I not? Go back. Home. Here we go. Sorry. The other thing I just want to pay attention to is, see how that is in yellow? That's called a pinned post. So each week when John and I are we're going to ask you each week, there's going to be like an accountability post. We will pin that post. It will turn this yellow color. Basically that like highlights that post. And so we'll try to keep those pinned. If it's something that we want you to comment on, or it's like your weekly check-in, we'll pin those so you can find them easier. But it works just like any other tool. Like you can post links to videos, you can do all kinds of stuff. But the biggest thing is remembering to thread. I also would ask that everybody upload a photo. There's nothing worse than your little icon just being like a avatar of like a nothing. And so that way, as we get to know each other, like actually have your photo uploaded would be helpful as well. But if you remember nothing else other than threading, then I feel like my job is done. So that's going to be the most important thing. The last thing is you can start a post by using the @ sign and typing the word here. And basically that is like a ping to the entire channel. So that would be the equivalent of you like standing up in class and raising your hand. Like, I have a question, I need everyone to like pay attention, to use that @ here. So if we'll use that sparingly, but if it's something like an announcement, let's say that we had to change a time to an event or something, we're going to always @ here to get your attention, but you're also welcome to do that. But the most important thing is threading and just engaging in the space. Again, you will get out of it. We're going to try to really post a lot of content in there, but if we're posting it and it's crickets, then it's not going to work so well. So we're really going to ask that you all engage in that space. Any immediate questions about Slack?
How do we get to?
Yes, to get this. So you should have gotten an invitation from Joe in your email that's asking you to join the Slack channel. If you have not seen that, just let us know and we'll make sure you get the invitation. But the invite comes via email, and then you click on it and it will create a username and password, or you can like link your Google account and you'll get signed in. CJ, do you have a picture of it? Okay. Any other immediate questions about Slack? Okay. So if I comment and ask you to thread, I'm not trying to be hateful. I'm just trying to help keep it organized. So just as a heads up to that. All right. So one thing I want to start with today, I don't know if any of you sort of feel like this person when it comes to nutrition and like setting your goals around nutrition, but just a lot of what I would call goal confusion. John and I have talked about this. Another way to put it is goal ambiguity. And so let me talk about what I mean. Over these next few weeks, whether you're going to do the 4-week or the 12-week, I need you to get crystal clear on what it is that you want to accomplish. So in working with clients in the past, goal confusion is something that messes people up over and over and over. And this is what it can sound like. I'm going to join this challenge. I'm so excited. Like, I'm going to do this. But I eat out 4 nights a week because my kids have a lot of sports and I'm never going to cook at home. Okay, well, those two things do not line up with each other, because you can't want to like get leaner and stronger or whatever your goal is and be unwilling to like budge at all on maybe some of the habits that you've got already in place. It could look like, I really want to get stronger. That's my number one goal. But I'm somebody who, I'm never going to eat breakfast. I have no appetite. So like, I'm not going to change that. Well, if you want to get stronger, you got to eat food. And skipping an entire meal of the day. So those two things they're not in alignment. Another example is, like, I'm just too busy to prep my meals, but I really want to feel better in my body. Well, some version of prep, I wish that you could outsource it. I mean, you could if you have an unlimited budget. You could pay somebody to make all your food. But for most of us, some degree of prep is going to have to happen if we want to reach the goals that we have. So I just want you to think about, what is my number one goal? So we're going to take like 5 minutes. You've got blank pieces of paper in your folder. I want you, if you need a pen, raise your hand. I want you to actually write down, what's your goal? What are you wanting to accomplish? Whether, again, you're here for 4 weeks or 12 weeks, I want you to get really, really crystal clear on, what do I want?
I got more too. Nice catch. Anybody else? You and Maria? I got more.
And it's okay if you're not 100%, or it's okay if like things shift, but I think having clarity of like spending some time really thinking about, what do I hope to get out of this? What is the goal that I'm aiming for? Is going to set you up for success. And so let's take like another minute, and then I'm going to ask a couple of you if you're willing to share what your goal is. So. Okay, who's willing to share? I would love it.
Gain muscle and lose fat.
All right, gain muscle and lose fat. I like it. All right, who else? Maria.
Lose weight.
Okay.
And specifically stop binge eating when I'm stressed.
Okay, yes, to stop stress. I love that. Very specific. Okay, Sam.
Learn food preparation techniques to help ensure my vegetables, fruits, and proteins are being hit daily, even when my schedule is free.
Ah, I love that. Love that. Okay. Anybody else want to share? Be willing to share? Yes, Megan.
I did sustainability. I did the
Yeah.
last challenge and did it, but then when the challenge was done,
Felt like,
practical habits.
yeah.
So I specifically did the 12-week this time.
Okay,
to help with sustainability.
longer, yes, to put in more like framework so that you don't sort of swing between all or nothing. Okay, I love it. Anybody else want to share? Chris?
Pretty much the same thing. I want to hit my goal weight by my birthday, which is right at the end of the challenge, and then maintain through the holidays.
Yes.
I wrote that.
Y'all are exactly
I
the
turned
same.
40. I'm about to turn 40. So
Oh, that's
I
right.
didn't want to hear that.
Yeah, but this clarity is really important because, like I said, it's like if I don't know what I want, right? And then we have to, it's almost also what Joe mentioned at the beginning about getting the most out of this. It's like that beginner's mindset is also a part of this, meaning like maybe what I've tried in the past, like letting go of all of those stories and really trying to start with a clean slate of what do I want, but also realizing that I know that we know this with our heads, but a lot of things say easy but live hard, right? And it's like you cannot keep doing exactly what you've done if you want a different outcome, right? And so really having to get honest, we all have to do this. This is not like I'm in this boat with y'all, so I don't mean it that way. It's like getting clear on if I want this thing, if I've written down what I want, I have got to go into this and be willing to shift habits, like my schedule, my priorities. Something's going to have to give. I can't keep doing my life exactly the way I was if I want this thing that I've written down on this piece of paper. And so just keeping that in mind as we go through that is going to be really important. So let's talk a little bit about why tracking your intake actually matters, because that is going to be the very first thing that you're going to start with this week. And I know a lot of you, because I've worked with some of you, know about tracking. You know why it's important. But I love this analogy. I do not take credit for this. I heard this recently. So I want you to imagine that you get into your car and there's no speedometer. And every day you get on the interstate and you're just like cruising down 65 and you constantly get pulled over almost every day for speeding. And you're like, well, I don't even know how fast I'm going. Like, I know there's a speed limit, but like, I don't even know what speed I'm going because I don't have a speedometer. So I have no way to gauge whether or not I'm staying within the boundaries that I need to. And you just keep doing that every day, and you are confused as to why you continue to get tickets. This is what happens with us and like health goals, right? We have no speedometer when it comes to what we're eating. We're not gauging of like, is this too much? Is this not enough? Like, why is it that I'm not reaching my goals? Or why is it that I'm going over and like weight is gaining, let's just say, like, because I don't have a way, I don't have anything to measure myself against. And that is what tracking your intake does. It's basically your speedometer. Eventually though, right? Who has had this experience? You now could be on the interstate, and most of us don't even look at our speedometer because you just kind of know what 70 feels like. You know, for the most part, you kind of settle in, and that eventually will be the goal, right? Is that you don't have to use this tool every single day of your life, but it basically is like getting you the framework so that you kind of feel what does this look like where I can maintain it for the long term. And so I loved that analogy, and I really feel like that is the goal that we're aiming for. The other thing I just want to acknowledge is that a lot of people, especially in nutrition, come to us and they are very much so in search of the perfect diet. They are in search of, well, you know, my mother-in-law went keto and she had like huge success, or I know somebody who eats like a strict paleo diet and they're like, you know, deadlifting like 300 or whatever it is. Like everybody has an experience of looking left or right at what somebody else is doing from a diet perspective and being like, well, maybe that's the thing I need to do because they had success. Why shouldn't I do that? And I want you all to look. You could literally blow this list out, like triple of what it is. But that right-hand column, what is repeated over and over? What does it say? Caloric deficit, caloric deficit, caloric deficit. Is there anything magical about intermittent fasting? No, it puts you in a caloric deficit. Is there anything magical about Weight Watchers? No, it puts you in a caloric deficit. Is there anything magical about paleo? No. Like, there's nothing magical about any of these diets. The commonality is a caloric deficit. And that is why tracking matters so much, because if you do not know calorically where you're at, then nothing is going to work, right? And sometimes why people think that diets work is they start intermittent fasting, and it is working, but it's working because they have restricted their calories or they're in a deficit. And so I think sometimes it's just easy to get pulled toward what's popular, but I just want you to come back to what matters is there is no magic, and it really starts with the foundation of what are you putting in your body every day, and do you have a baseline? Do you know what that is? So we're going to talk a little bit about macros, macronutrients. Some of you, again, I know we're very familiar with this already, but when we say macros, obviously that's short for macronutrients. There's only 3 categories of macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Over these next 12 weeks, or 4 weeks into 12 weeks, we're going to do a deep dive on all of these. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth of these today, especially protein. John's going to give a very super in-depth overview of protein. But first and foremost, all of these matter. Again, back to the slide before, there's a lot of popular diets that will want to restrict certain categories, or they'll, make one category a villain if this is the reason why you've not been able to reach your goals. All of that is false. All of these are needed in some capacity for you to live a healthy, balanced lifestyle. And so, this is not about, I can't ever have, again, carbs in particular get a bad rap, especially for the type of training we do here. They're really important. I'm going to go through this part pretty quickly because, again, we're going to dive into this a whole lot deeper over the next few weeks. With protein, it is, I guess if you had to say there's one most important macronutrient, it could be argued that it's protein. It's probably the hardest one, and I know a lot of you, women in particular, I'll put myself in that category. This is the one that we tend to fall short on. It's harder for whatever reason. Not everybody, Nicole. It's easy for Nicole, no. But this one tends to be one of the hardest macronutrients. You might be eating protein, but you likely aren't eating enough, and that's true typically across the board. The other thing I want you to pay attention to is that it is the most satiating macronutrient, meaning it is the macronutrient that will keep you fullest the longest. So if you were eating less calories than what you're used to, if you're eating sufficient protein intake, you will feel fuller than if those calories were coming from another place. And so it really, really does help from a hunger standpoint. Again, John's going to go into a full-on MasterClass just on protein in the coming weeks. But you'll also notice that it's 4 calories per gram. We'll explain why that's important. The second one is, again, carbohydrates. Most of us love carbs, and they're good for us. It is the body's preferred energy source. The body does burn fat as well, but most importantly, it's our brain's preferred source of energy. If you've ever been exhausted and had a really bad night of sleep and you're at work, there's a reason why you want candy. Your body biologically is looking for the fastest way to get its energy increased, and it knows that comes from simple sugar, straight carbohydrates. That's why you're at the vending machine at 2:30 getting M&Ms, is because your body is looking for a quick energy source, and carbohydrates are going to get that for you. These are really important for performance. Again, we'll talk more about this, but getting sufficient carbohydrate intake is really, really important. And the last one is fats. Most of us know this by now, but just in case that you don't, fats do not make you fat, which is an old dietary myth that has been populated, and especially by women. I'm 44, I remember being in junior high, and Snackwells, who remembers Snackwells? Come on, somebody. It was these disgusting low-fat brownies, cookies, whatever, but it was the low-fat craze, and it's specifically aimed toward women. A lot of marketing about eat low fat. Low fat is really, really bad in the sense that when they take out the fat, they usually add a lot of other junk and stuff, and so it's not a good option. The other thing that's important to note is there are certain vitamins in the body that unless fat is present, we can't even absorb certain nutrients. So it plays a vital role in the body, hair, skin, nails, lots of things. Fat is very important, but it's also calorically the most dense. So if you looked, protein and carbohydrates were 4 calories per gram. Fat is 9. I'm not a math person. I'm not asking you to commit that to memory, but what I want you to be mindful of, this is why people years ago, especially in the CrossFit world, if they were doing paleo, paleo is a lot of no processed food, but a lot of nuts and seeds and healthy fats. But look, y'all, too much avocado will still cause you to gain weight. I don't care if it's coming from almonds, avocado, whatever, but too much is still too much. And so people sometimes think oh, well, that's healthy. So the quantity doesn't matter. It really matters a lot around fats because, again, it's the most calorically dense. A little bit of nut butter gone too far and your calories you're pretty much over your limit for the day. It's very easy to overeat this category, and so just something to be mindful of. This pyramid of priority, some of you have probably seen this before. I'm not going to go over all of this, and even throughout the MasterClass, we're not going to talk about all of these buckets. But what I want you to pay attention is if you are somebody that is wanting to change your body composition, meaning you either want to get leaner, you want to get stronger, or both of those things, there is a difference between weight loss and body composition changes. What I would love for all of you is that you do not care what the scale says. I mean, yes, we need the scale as a marker, but what matters most is the composition of your body changing? The scale can do what it may do, but this is the order of priority. If you're trying to change your diet to eat in a better way to be able to change your body composition, the very first rung of that ladder, so to speak, is calorie balance, meaning I have to be consuming the right amount of calories. That is where we start. If we do not get that piece of the puzzle in place, everything above it falls apart. It really isn't, it doesn't matter. We have to start with that foundational piece of calorie balance. And maybe not surprising, we are very bad judges of this when left on our own accord. People will say, like, I don't eat that bad. Like, I think I'm fine. And then when you start putting pen to paper, it's like, oh, this is like, I start logging alcohol and treats and the full basket of chips that I ate at Tito's and like all the things. You will see very quickly that calorie balance is a lot more complex than what we make it out to be. Okay. Now we're going to talk about determining your target intake. So I'm going to give you this, there's going to be a formula and some steps. I'm going to post all this in Slack, so I don't want you to feel like, I can't like write all this down fast enough. This is going to be part of your sort of homework for week 1 is walking through this, but I will give you this in Slack, so don't feel like you've got to write all this down. We're doing this a little bit differently this time, and I'll explain why. Let's talk about this first. So there's 2 ends of a spectrum when it comes to being in a calorie deficit. So BMR, not to be confused with BMI, body mass index. BMR, who knows what that is? Tell me.
How many calories you burn doing absolutely nothing?
Yes, exactly. Perfect, Cameron. It's exactly what it is. If you were to lay in a bed for 24 hours and you did not move, your body is still burning calories, right? For digestion, for respiration, just to keep you alive. Everybody's body has a different set point. Some of that is gender, muscle mass, age, sex, etc., right? But everybody has a set BMR. That number, again, is how many calories that your body needs to keep you alive and functioning. On the other end of that spectrum is BMR plus how active am I? Am I sedentary for my job? Do I walk my dog every day and get 10,000 steps? Do I train at the gym, 4 days a week? What does my activity look like? Total daily energy expenditure. So that's the far end of the spectrum. A calorie deficit is somewhere between those 2 bookends, right? Anywhere in between there technically is a calorie deficit. But here's what I want you to pay attention to, especially for my females in the room. If you are eating less than your BMR, so that bottom left-hand corner, you will not make, I shouldn't say not, it's very unlikely you will make any progress toward any goal. And that means fat loss, strength, you name it. If you are not giving yourself enough calories to function and keep yourself alive, the body gets very, very stingy and just says something must be like awry in their environment, because like I'm not even getting fed the bare minimum. It is very common. A lot of my female clients will be under eating this number. Any guess as to the number that they magically think they need to eat?
1,200.
Yes. That got touted somewhere, who knows where in the marketing world years ago. But women will come to me and say, well, I thought I had to, I eat 1,200 calories. That's like a toddler. That's not enough fuel for a grown woman or man. On the other side of that is if you are already lean, meaning you are at your desired body fat percentage. I'm as lean as I want to be, but I really want to focus on getting stronger. Then you actually are going to have to eat a little more than your TDEE because the body needs that surplus of calories to convert. And so knowing, again, back to what your goal is and what you want to work on, you've really got to have clarity because it's going to, like, where you fall on the spectrum is going to be really important. So any questions about that? Okay.
Tell me my problem.
You're like, so this is it. Do you undereat?
I very much.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And we'll explore this in the next few weeks, getting to the root of why do I do that? Is it like in my routine? Is it habit? Is it low appetite? Like getting to the root of why is it that that's so hard for me? Is it I don't have food prepped and then I skip meals, whatever it is. But having the awareness that I know I do that and I need to work on it is a great place to start. So this is the process that we're going to teach you. This is a simplified model than what we've used in the past. This is going to assume that you're wanting to get leaner as your initial goal. So if you were somebody that's like, I actually am as lean as I want to be and I really want to focus on strength, you can talk to John in particular and he'll help with this in terms of knowing where you need to be. But this is going to be, and I put this in red, y'all, there's a million ways you can do this. So I'm not standing here saying this is like the gospel of you have to do it this way. This is just a way you can do it that's very simplified, and that's where we're going with it. So again, we're focusing on that bottom rung of the pyramid. We got to first figure out how calorically, where do I need to be? And so you're going to take your goal or target weight in pounds and multiply it by 12. So the example here is like a female, her goal weight is 150 pounds. Multiply that by 12, it's 1,800 calories. Now, the second step of that process is you're going to set a range plus or minus 100 calories because this is not about being perfect. And I think that's one of the reasons why people like fall off of stuff like this. They're like, well, I was at 1703 today. And so like my whole, or 1803, my whole day is ruined. And it's like, no, your body doesn't care. So we're going to have you set a range of calories to aim for, plus or minus 100 around your goal. So again, if your goal weight, if it came out to 1,800, your range would be on average each day, I need to eat somewhere between 1,700 and 1,900, okay? So that's gonna be like step one. Step two is you're gonna establish your protein intake. So again, you'll learn more about this, but this again is really, really important. But the way that you're going to figure out your intake for this is you're going to take your goal and target weight in pounds and multiply it by 0.7. So in that example of the person who weighs 150 pounds, that's 105 grams of protein as a minimum. That is not, that means like, can I go over that? Absolutely. True or false? Will going over protein ever be detrimental to your goals? No, it won't be. Because John, you can explain this more, but the body will not store it as fat. In the sense that, well, I'll let you explain it.
The process, we'll get pretty nerdy in 2 weeks when we talk about protein in more detail, but.
John, I'm going to put my mic on John.
Yeah.
Go ahead, you can just hold it for now if you want to.
So the body will store protein as fat, but there's a process by which it has to convert protein into carbohydrates, and that process takes energy in itself, and your body does not like to do that. So more than likely, it's going to use it for its metabolic processes, and then it's going to excrete the remaining protein out. So it's really difficult to store protein as fat.
So I don't want anybody to be like, oh, my goal was 105 and I ate 120 today. That's good. In fact, the more the better, right, in that sense. But really, for most people, having that bottom threshold of no matter what, I've got to eat at least this amount, that's what I want you to be mindful of, okay? And not letting yourself drop below this. The other thing around that is going to be consistency. Again, I will have people that say, I can do this for 4 days a week. The other 3, it goes out the window. And so what we're really working on in this 12 weeks is consistency, right? As you know, trying to hit that minimum daily is going to be really, really important. So that's step 2. So we've got our calories, we've got our protein. Step 3, this one, who knows how much fiber they eat? Nobody knows how much. John and I were talking about this before. John was like, I don't even know if I know how much fiber I eat. Y'all, fiber is very, very important, like for a multitude of reasons. Women, assuming that you don't have any like digestive issues, around 25 grams of fiber a day is going to be how much you're going to aim for. And for men, it's about 35 grams a day. Here's the deal though, guys. It needs to come from whole food sources. So we're going to be talking about this week after next, I think is when we talk about fruits and veggies. But I want this coming from actual plant food. I don't want you to go and get Fiber One bars at Walmart. Now, if you're on a road trip and you're like, you got to do what you got to do, that's fine. But like, I don't want that being your standard. Like, I'm just eating Fiber One bars to try to hit this number. Your stomach won't like you if you do that also. But this is really important. Again, fiber also plays a role in satiety. It helps you stay fuller longer. By aiming for this, it is almost impossible to hit this number from whole food sources without then having to work on fruit and vegetable intake, which not going to be a surprise. We're going to have you working on your fruits and vegetables because none of us eat enough of it. And so you'll be able to track, as you're tracking in whatever app you're using, it will automatically be tracking fiber. You'll just have to find what your total was for the day. It'll break it down depending on what app that you use. Has anybody ever tracked this before? Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, like, I mean, some people when they start doing this, they're like, I'm getting like 6 grams a day. Like I don't get nearly enough. But this is going to be something that I want you to focus on. So that's calorically, right? Your calories and your protein. I just put this up here as like additional targets I want you to be mindful of. We'll talk about more of these throughout the MasterClass. One is water. Again, not going to be super surprising, but like if you drink no water or very little water, that is not good, and it will have an implication on a lot of other things. And so being mindful of how much water am I drinking, am I getting enough, CJ? Really being mindful of that is going to be important. The other thing is, if you have the ability to track your steps, like through a watch, most of us do, or sometimes people use their phone, the 10,000 step target is very arbitrary. That was actually like started by a pedometer maker, like in Japan, I think. Is like it was just an arbitrary, like it isn't magic. Is there benefit to moving outside of the gym if you're training somewhere? 1,000% yes. If you do have the ability to track it, trying to aim for a minimum of 7,500. And again, for me, if I don't track this is a very easy one for me that I can look at my watch at the end of the day and I've got like 4,200 steps because I work remotely and like it's just easy to not get up and get moving. And I always tell people, if you're coming into the gym and training, let's say 4 days a week, but then your steps are less than 5,000 every other day, like that is not enough. Like those 4 hours collectively, like there's just not enough movement. And so really being mindful. NEAT, does anybody know what that stands for? Non-exercise activity thermogenesis. In layman's terms, that is the calories you burn from natural movement. So anytime we can increase our NEAT, we automatically increase our calorie burn. And so it's just really, also, I could like do, and maybe we will, but like I could talk a lot about the health benefits of walking, period. Sunlight, fresh air, stress relief, cortisol reduction in females in particular. There's just like huge health benefits. It's not sexy or exciting, but it is extremely, extremely beneficial for mental health and just overall physical health. And then the last thing is, if you are somebody who's training here, again, we know we have a few people in the challenge that aren't members of the gym, you should be strength training ideally at least 2 to 4 times a week. And that means if you are here, don't pick to come only on Metcon days. So like if there is a heavy day programmed here for whatever lift, like make sure that you are lifting heavy throughout the week. Or if it's dumbbell work, like lift heavy, like be mindful that you're not just doing like Metcon type stuff, like really focus on making sure you're getting in enough strength training. Does anybody, yes, Joe.
I was just, well, John, you have a mic. Can you speak just for a second to that strength training happens in days other than heavy days as well? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, so, let me think of an example. Like, we may do, so a heavy day incorporates, like, obviously something like a slower lift, and you typically you're going to rest between sets, but there's, so to Joe's point, there's a lot of Metcon workouts where like Helen comes to mind, where you're going to do pull-ups, you're going to do kettlebell swings, and you're going to go for a run. So there's enough resistance within a very small time frame that you still approach muscular failure within that workout. And so that's kind of what we mean when we say heavy days. And you should certainly aim for the stimulus. So choose a weight that allows you to hit that stimulus that Joe talks about during his whiteboard brief. But, I would go, if you can, go as close to RX as you can while maintaining stimulus. So you don't want to shortchange yourself. Does that kind of?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you can gain. Yeah, there's a lot of meat on the bone with just, most of the days that we have here, even if it's not a heavy day. But the heavy days in particular are they're going to stimulate your metabolism.
Yeah. So these are going to be things where, especially for this first week, we're not asking you to like track this and report it to us, but this is more about kind of taking inventory of where am I at with these things. Like, yes, calorie balance is really important, but also like, do I ever get up and take a 30-minute walk? And again, it doesn't have to be, I tell people, 3 10-minute blocks in a day, that's still great too, right? Especially if you work or you commute and it's hard for you to carve out extra time, but these things are all gonna matter as you think about shifting. A little bit about monitoring progress. So one thing that I really encourage clients to do, so again, weight is only one data point in terms of what success actually looks like, but it is valuable. I mean, I'm not pretending like it's not. However, it is not valuable if you weigh yourself every Friday and you look at that number and you're like, well, last Friday I was 150 and this Friday I'm 153. Throw this thing out the window and like, I hate the scale and this sucks and I'm not even eating pizza and like it ain't working, and we just like get in this mental spiral of like, this is awful and I hate this. And that is in particular for female clients, this is important, is that as a female, our weight can fluctuate in a 24-hour period 3 to 5 pounds. That number has nothing to do with fat gain, nothing. It can do with digestion, where you are in your cycle. It can do with food, like what you had the night before, was it high in sodium? It can do, are you dehydrated? Are you on a medication? Like, there's a host of things. So tracking weekly average weight is a much more effective way to use the scale as a measure of success. And basically what you do for that, you can go old school and keep a dry erase marker in your bathroom, weigh yourself, write it on your mirror. At the end of those 7 days, add it up, divide by 7, and that's your weekly average weight. If that number is trending down from week to week, then we are moving in general in the right direction. But it is much better, if you're gonna use the scale, using a weekly average is gonna be a much clearer picture of your progress versus just standing on it once or twice a week and making it mean something that it actually doesn't mean when you look at it. The other option is to take progress photos. I know nobody really wants to do this, but it really is helpful. There's I've seen an Instagram reel, and maybe some of you have seen it before, and it's like this trainer, she's holding a roll of paper towels. I don't know if you've seen it, and she just pulls one square off at a time. And if you're just looking at it, like the paper, it's not changing. And then all of a sudden when she fast forwards, like the paper towel now, the roll is like super, super small. And it's like, because every day you're tearing off one sheet, you don't think it's changing, but in reality it is. And that's what photos can do for us, is you can start to see differences. And so I will tell people, once a month, once a week, whatever you want to do, but take photos, front, back, side, just for comparison, because sometimes you will see body composition changes there that you aren't seeing on the scale. And it can be another, I don't have it up there, but you can measure like inches. Inches specifically tend to fall off faster than pounds do. And so if you are somebody that wants to measure that, you can. But other data points around progress would be things like, do I feel better? Meaning that my energy level, am I noticing that I have more energy? Am I getting stronger? If this is a lift that I can compare to 3 months ago, was I able to go heavier? Was I faster? Was something different? And can I see marked progress there? And then also just paying attention to sleep and stress. a lot of times when we improve our diet, everything else gets better. Things like we sleep better, right? Maybe if we're not having as much alcohol, which impedes sleep. Yeah, stress, like everybody's like, no eye contact on that one. But just thinking about other ways to measure, like, is this moving in a positive direction, right? And like, how can I measure that? But don't be tempted to put all your stock just in the scale, okay? It's really not gonna give you the full picture. So,
isn't there an app you've recommended for tracking?
yes, Happy Scale is the app that I like. It's free, Happy Scale. I also have like a Bluetooth scale, and the app for that automatically tracks your weekly average, so that is built in. But if you want to, if you don't want to do your own math, Happy Scale will do the math for you. Okay, by show of hands, who here has tracked their intake before using an app? Okay, and on paper. Okay, so most everybody has had experience before, but the basics. So if you don't know, or you haven't, or it's been a long time, there's really only 2 non-negotiable things that you gotta have in place. And the first one is you gotta have an app. Choose your own preference. What do you want? Most people use MyFitnessPal. It's just because it's the most popular. I use my Macros Plus, and that's only because like I've been using it for years, and I just got spoiled to that one, but there's no magic. But they all work basically the same. Lose it, you pick it. But you need a tracking app of some sort. They all have features of like barcode scanning and that sort of thing. MyFitnessPal does tend to have the largest database available, so that's one of the reasons why most people stick with that one. And then you need a digital food scale, something like this. They're like less than $10, Amazon, Walmart, whatever. The flat ones are better than like the bowl ones. Don't get those. You want one that's an actual flat surface. Do I want you to carry this around in your purse or your bag and take it with you places? No, but it is a tool because even in seasons where I do not track my intake, I use my scale every single day. It just helps me stay mindful of like, I thought that was a 4-ounce piece of salmon, I'll weigh it, it's 3.2. I need more because I know I want to eat at least 4 ounces. Like, you know what I mean? So it just helps me stay present. Even if I'm not tracking, I still use my scale almost daily. So, okay. The next thing about tracking is embrace the suck. And so what I mean by that is if you were someone that has experienced tracking in the past, there is no way around this. In the beginning especially, or if you've done it and you're just now getting back to it, the first week is hot garbage. It's miserable usually because it's like, it's just arduous, right? It's tedious. You gotta like remember to do it. You gotta like, it's just a lot. And there's no way to go around that. So I always just, if you know that up front and just remember, it's a process to get back into the swing of it. It gets faster the more that you do it. But you don't get to bypass this. It's just part of the process, and it takes a little bit for your brain to start getting back into the habit. This second one, I cannot stress this enough. So if you are somebody who has tracked and it's not gone well, or you've been frustrated with it, or you've not gotten the results that you've wanted, I could almost guarantee you it's some version of this second point, which is tracking is primarily a planning tool. It is not a reflection tool. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you wait to the end of the day and you sit down at night in your bed and you open MyFitnessPal and you start to retroactively enter your day, just stop. It's really, because at that point, you're not using it for the intended purpose, because we are very bad, I don't know, like to try to remember that in detail, and accuracy drops really, really low. So I want you to think about this as a planning tool, not as a reflection tool, which means you gotta do it in the moment. And we'll talk about some ways to do that, but it's first a planning tool, not something to be done in reverse. Also, it is a tool. It is not intended to be forever. I don't want anybody going to Thanksgiving dinner and tracking their intake on Thanksgiving Day. I don't want you to go on vacation necessarily and feel like you're like, this is something I have to do forever, or I'm never gonna reach my goals. It is a tool to educate yourself on your patterns, your habits, where you have opportunity to make changes, but it is not intended for you to do this forever. Now, I know some people that they just like it and it works with their lifestyle and they choose to do it, but I don't want you to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm learning to do this and like I'm gonna be like chained to this now for eternity. It's really meant to create patterns and awareness and to use it as a tool like this, meaning some of you have tracked before, maybe you haven't tracked in months. It's a tool. We're gonna dust it off, pick it off the shelf, we're gonna implement it and we're gonna use it again, but it doesn't mean I have to use it forever. For those of you that have tracked in the past, what do you feel like has been your biggest barrier to staying consistent? Time, the time to enter it. Okay, what else? What else has gotten in the way? If you think about it.
Prepping.
Okay, just having food prepped and knowing like what to.
It can be hard to estimate how much of whatever lines up with the entry.
Okay, so just making entries match, that sort of thing. What else? Anybody else have experience of feeling like?
Meetings, a lot of meetings that food's involved in.
Okay, so like you having foods prepped for you or presented to you because you're in meetings and it's like, okay, how do I enter this? I don't know like how much this is. Okay, yeah, absolutely, depending on your job. Anybody else have any barriers that come to mind?
Not wanting to write down what you want to eat.
Yes, right? The avoidance of like, maybe I did have Jenny's ice cream, but now I really don't want to log it, right? Because I don't want to have to see that, you know, like the numbers, you know, on paper, so to speak. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different reasons why that it can be hard to stay with forever, which again, hopefully is why you'll see it just as a tool. So what are some ways that you can set yourself up for success to be able to hit your targets? So because I mentioned protein tends to be the number one macro that people fall short on, my suggestion is to take your protein target once you do your math, divide that number by 3 and see what that is, right? So, and then kind of set targets for each meal. If most of us are eating 3 meals a day on average, so this is a good example. Like if you were trying to aim for, what's 150 divided by 3? I don't do math.
50.
What is it?
50.
It's 50? Okay, so let's say that's 50 grams of protein at each meal is your target. So if you go and you pre-log your breakfast and it is 19 grams of protein, what does that tell you? It's insufficient, right? And what's likely going to happen when you get to the end of the day? You're in the hole. And this is what happens a lot of times is people are not being proactive, and so they get to the end of the day and they'll be like, I'm 64 grams of protein short. Like, is there some sort of magic shake now that I could just guzzle and like, you know, get all this in? I mean, you could, that's not ideal. But I don't want anybody doing that. So I want you to set targets for yourself of if I enter a meal and it is way off from my like divided by 3 number, that is a red flag that I'm either gonna have to do one of 2 things. I need to make adjustments right now to what I'm about to eat, or I'm gonna have to be super intentional about the next meal and or a snack to try to build in that gap that I know I already have. And so if you don't do that with your protein, it will be very easy to get to the end of your day and have a massive gap to try to make up. The other thing I would encourage you to try, and we're gonna talk about this throughout these next few weeks, is I am actually gonna challenge you all to pre-log an entire day the day before. And I'm gonna have you screenshot it and actually put it in the Slack channel so that we can all see each other's pre-logged days. So it's gonna be an activity that we're gonna do. This is one of my absolute favorite things to do. Like the night before, take 10 minutes and just pre-log your day. Does that mean I get to lunch and like, well, I ended up not eating the thing that I said I was going to eat? Is that the end of the world? No, just change it out, right? Like delete it and log what you are gonna eat. But by doing that process, you start to learn what does it actually look like to get myself to balance out, right? And it just makes, and then that way when you wake up, really it's like somebody has made you a meal plan, because then I'm just going to eat what I have logged for the day. I don't have to like, that decision fatigue is a real challenge for people, especially if you are in a job where you were having to make decisions all day long and there's a lot coming at you. This is just one more thing than your brain is having to think about, and like, if this, and then what about this, and could I have this, or should I not have this? It takes all that out of the equation. Pre-log The other thing that's nice, if you are somebody that does love a treat of some sort, I always tell people, pre-log it. So if I know that I am somebody that if I don't have a little bit of something sweet after a meal, it's going to be hard for me to stay consistent. I'm going to feel restricted. Well, that's okay. The day before, pre-log it and basically back your day around that. And so it gives you the opportunity to be able to fit in some things, as opposed to what happens is people will eat normally. They'll get to the last meal of the day and they sort of chuck everything out the window because they're like, I really do want that treat. And I'm going to go over and I don't care. I'm not going to log. I'm just going to basically give up and I'll start over tomorrow. And this really prevents that from happening. So like just be intentional and know yourself. That could be a glass of wine. It didn't have to be like sweets. It's just like something that you enjoy, that if you were to be intentional about pre-logging it, it's going to make it more likely for you to stick with it. Or if you're somebody that's a creature of habit and you're like, look, I eat the same thing for breakfast every single day, like every day. Just copy and paste that in your log Monday through Friday. That takes one meal where you don't have to log it, right? Because you've just copied and pasted it over to every single day. That works too. But these are just some like quick practical ways of like how to hit your daily targets and make it a little bit easier. Common mistakes that I see. So number one, selecting the wrong item from the database. I always use this example. I coached a guy that he was having Buffalo Wild Wings, and he had logged like he's like, but I'm logging like, and it's not working. And the chicken wings, the entry had 0 fat. Chicken wings obviously have fat, right? And so like he had picked an item from the database that was not correct. So some of it is like using a little bit of deductive reasoning of like, I don't think this is right. And so just make sure when you have the chance, most apps have a verified option. It'll have, in MyFitnessPal, it's a little blue check mark. That means that the nutritional value for that item has been verified. It's correct. Read your label, like just cross-reference, or if you're just unsure, like Google is your friend, just Google it and see if you can find that information. We've already talked about estimating, eyeballing. Again, this is the worst. People will be like, it was just a half a cup of oats, like I'm pretty sure. And if you were to weigh that out, it's probably more like 3/4 of a cup. And so when you're eyeballing a lot of things, your log is not going to be accurate. I always tell people, tracking your intake does not mean it's accurate. And so people will say all the time, well, I'm tracking everything, but is it right? Is it actually correct? Otherwise, like, it's not helpful. We've already talked about logging in reverse. Not tracking alcohol is a big one, because again, those calories do count. Or BLTs, if you've heard me talk before, that means bites, licks, and tastes. Basically, that's the spoonful of peanut butter, that's the hummus that was left over on my kid's plate that I like scooped up on a chip or whatever. It's the Hershey Kiss I grabbed off somebody's desk as I was walking by, whatever it is. But it's like little things that done collectively and repeatedly, those calories do add up and can be sort of a missing place that people don't often pay attention. And that last one is, when you first start doing this, like, please don't make any casseroles or things that have 75 ingredients. Don't go on Pinterest and try to find, like, John and I are both fans of keep your stuff separate, right? Like, have a protein source, or carbohydrate source, and like your veggies. Like, don't try to like blend a whole bunch of stuff together in some sort of combo. I know it's almost soup season, and I will be sharing some ideas for soups that are good, but like maybe don't make a soup your first week where it has like 22 ingredients and it's hard to measure out. So any other mistakes that you all feel like you've ran into before that has like made this harder for you or not as accurate as you know it should be? Anything else? How many of you have been guilty of logging in reverse? Most people are like, yeah, I've done it. Again, that means you got to the end of the day and you tried to recall, like, okay, yeah, for lunch, I think I had like, 4 ounces of chicken, and at breakfast I had like 1 egg, and like you're just like going back at the end of the day and like retrospectively adding it in, and that's, we're not good at that, meaning we'll be inaccurate. A couple of things around setting yourself up for success. So this is what I tell people: control what you can, and that starts at home. When you leave home, I understand that, Megan, I'll pick on you. You've got client meetings, you've got dinners, you've got events. I know, Mike, you often take clients out for stuff. Like, I know, like, when we leave our homes, it is harder. And I'm not, my husband's a firefighter. There's all kinds of junk at the fire hall all the time, right? He can't control what the HOA is bringing in, and crumble cookie, and like all the stuff that gets brought there. But we all have control over our home environment, and that really is where success starts. So I always say, let's start there and focus on that.
Ice cream.
Yeah, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Ice cream will win every time.
yeah, it will, every single time, because you're a human, right? You're never gonna pick spinach or broccoli over ice cream, because who would? And so does that mean you can't ever have that in your freezer? Of course not. But it's just thinking about, so people get real hung up on, like, I have no willpower, I have no motivation. You don't have a willpower problem. Most people have an environment problem, meaning they have put themselves in an environment where they are constantly being, like, forced to white knuckle their way of, like, don't eat that, or like, just have one of those. And it's like, that is a limited resource, right? And so don't put yourself in those situations if you know that's going to make it harder for you. And I'm sensitive. I understand that sometimes we have mates that aren't on board, or kids that like stuff, and that sometimes can make it harder. But just like, be mindful of, am I making this harder for me because of what I have at home? Keeping a bottle of wine open in the fridge, you're going to be like, well, it don't need to get wasted. it's been corked, so let's go, Like, it's harder, right? And so just be mindful of, am I making this harder for myself because my environment is not helping set me up for success? I love this quote: if a food's in your possession, located in your residence, either you, someone you love, or someone you marginally tolerate will eventually eat it. And that is facts, right? Somebody is going to eat it eventually. It just makes it a lot harder. Alcohol, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but a couple of things around alcohol. And John taught me something even just before this about alcohol that I didn't even know. I always say, first and foremost, alcohol impedes the fat burning process. So again, your liver wants to burn fat. If alcohol is in the system, fat burning is ceased, and alcohol, getting the alcohol out of your body, is the liver's first priority. And so I always say with alcohol, it's frequency and quantity are the two most important things. How often am I having it? And when I do have it, how much of it am I having? And that's where it's a slippery slope. But just know that it impedes fat burning, but also muscle growth.
Yeah, muscle growth through muscle protein synthesis is impeded by alcohol.
So if you were somebody that's like, well, I'm already lean, but I want to get stronger, you were shooting yourself in the foot with muscle growth and development the more frequently that you have alcohol. So this does not mean that you cannot have it. It just means be mindful of frequency, quantity, and just where are the habits that I've established around this. I will also say with alcohol, it needs to be logged, which means it needs to be measured. And that is number one. People will say it had to be 3 ounces, and you pour 3 ounces and you're like, it is tiny amount, right? And so if you are gonna have it, you actually do need to measure it to know, was that how much bourbon, how much wine, what was that? Obviously sticking to wine or liquor is going to be better than, calorically speaking, than mixed drinks and that sort of thing, so that's pretty straightforward. This quote I do like because, and it's not just alcohol, you could insert another habit in that blank, but y'all, anything is going to require some degree of discipline if you want a different outcome, right? And that might mean alcohol, if that is the thing. It might mean, Oreos for somebody else, right? You could insert whatever there, but there is a degree of recognizing it will require discipline. Something about this habit is likely going to have to shift if I want what I wrote down on my paper, really. And again, that comes back to that clarity of, if I want this, then I've got to be willing to shift around some of the things that I'm doing, or be disciplined around certain situations. Otherwise, I'm not going to hit my goal. All right, perfect time. We've got a couple more minutes, and then we're going to talk about what are the first action steps that you're going to work on this week, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So Sometimes we'll call these commitments, action steps. If I say those, that's interchangeable, so just we'll use both. But this is basically your homework for this first week of the masterclass is you're going to calculate your intake goal. Again, I'll post that formula in the Slack channel. You're going to download or re-download your tracking app of preference, and you're going to start tracking. If you need a food scale, obviously I didn't put that up there, but you need to order that as well. So this is the first week is about creating your infrastructure. Like, let's get back in the habit of I'm logging everything that I'm eating, I'm weighing and measuring things, I have awareness of what stuff is, and engage in Slack, right? So like be in the channel, like let's be active together. And so that's the foundational piece that we're gonna work on this week. And so that's your kind of homework for the first week of this. All right, Q&A on anything that we've talked about what to expect, anything at all. So John and I both will answer these.
On the Slack,
Yes.
the mobile versus kind of
Yeah.
how you showed it when you were talking about threads and stuff. So,
Yes.
like,
Okay. So if you go home, hold on, and let's go to the masterclass community. So like, here I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make a post, and then I'm gonna say like, I'll do this.
I see that you're typing.
Let's intro ourselves. Okay, so I'm gonna ping everybody, and so now that post is there, and so now to thread, you'll see it if you click on it, and see where that it says reply and thread. Yep, just look for that little bubble. Yep, and that will thread there. Good question. Okay, other questions about homework, what you're supposed to be doing, anything at all that you can anticipate that you're worried about that you need a strategy for with this first week?
Are y'all gonna post recipes?
Yes, we will as a part of we're gonna do a thread on resources that we suggest and like, and so absolutely, we can start a thread on that with ideas or like websites that we use or recommend.
Yeah, I'm interested in like food prepping recipes.
Yeah, well, so what week is our food? That's in week 5, right? Yeah. We have a whole class on meal prepping and planning, so we'll get into a lot of the details of that.
Remind me, Megan, I do have a resource that's like 10 easy meal prep recipes that I can put in the slide.
Is that
Yeah.
the same thing I do every day? Like what I did the last challenge, but it's like,
Yeah, no, variety. If you know that boredom is a part of like a challenge, then you want to mix in some other things. Other questions?
I have a
Yes,
question.
Mike.
Your calorie intake,
Yes.
that's probably gonna change weekly, monthly.
Good question. So how would you know if it needs to change or not? So number one would be measuring your progress. So like, am I losing weight too fast? It would be an indicator that maybe my calories are too low, right? If I'm and a healthy rate of weight loss, if fat loss, if getting leaner is a goal, would be somewhere between 0.5 to 1.5. With guys, it can go as high as 2 pounds a week. Anything above that, most likely you're losing muscle along with fat. It's too aggressive. So if you were to be losing, 3 to 4 pounds or 4+ pounds in a week, calorically, you may have underestimated what you need. So that would be one indicator. It would be like my rate of weight loss. Are my calories correct? Other thing is just paying attention to how you feel, right? Like, am I super hungry? Do I not feel full enough? You can look at that. You can look at performance, right, in the gym. Like if I feel like I'm completely out of gas, maybe I have set a target for myself that actually is not reflective of what I'm wanting, right? So it's like I might have set my calorie goals at a fat loss rate, but in reality, I'm trying to get stronger and I probably need to be on the higher end, not on the lower end, and so it might require an adjustment. So yeah, so just pay attention to kind of markers of performance, and your weight in particular would be an indication. If you feel like you're running into that, just tag John and I, and we can dive into the specifics of do you need an adjustment? Yeah, good question. Other questions, concerns, worries about this first week?
No, you can go ahead.
Like, so obviously we're doing it together.
Yes.
And obviously what he needs looks way different than what I need. Are there any good, like, resources for
Yeah, that's a great question.
and how to
Yeah.
balance?
Restate the question.
Oh, yeah, sorry. The question was, what if you have a mate or a partner that's doing this with you, but like your goals are pretty different in terms of just like calorie intake or whatever it might be, and like what's best to kind of strategize around that. Not to oversimplify, but back to that point about whatever you're cooking, like keeping it individual. So it's like, if we're having burgers, like Austin will always have 2, where I usually just have 1, right? Or like he'll make his a lot higher ounces than mine. So yeah, he needs more than me. He's going to have more sweet potatoes than I'm gonna have. Like he's just gonna have more of everything that I've made. And so it's just more about, that's why it's helpful to have things prepped like individually versus like things that are combined, because it makes it easier to tweak your quantities. Yeah, where it becomes mentally challenging is like they're eating all the food and you're like, this is hard that like you're getting a lot more than me. But typically just like cooking one thing is fine. It's just make it where you can adjust your own portion size, if that makes sense. So, yes.
All proteins, do those need to be raw weight or cooked weight?
This is the ever-old debate. Technically it's raw, but I have a feeling about, well, go ahead.
So
I've been on back and forth.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to.
In
Yeah.
other words, it doesn't matter, they don't care.
So weigh your protein cooked, weigh it cooked, and then but make sure you log the cooked version as well. So like I use My Fitness Pal.
Mm-hmm.
So when I choose like a ground beef, for example, I'm going to choose a
Cooked.
cooked and typically drained and rinsed product as well, because that's how I process my ground beef when I cook it for like tacos, for example. So log a product that is the same as what you're cooking.
I always
Great
say
question, though.
pick a version and just stay consistent. Where people get messed up is like one time they'll log it the raw weight and the next time they'll log it the cooked weight. It's just like pick one. Personally, I think it's easier to pick the cooked version because like nobody wants to be like weighing out raw chicken, and it's just, it's like a whole thing. And so, but just stay consistent is the most important part. Pick one and stay consistent.
When you eat out as well, you can't weigh the raw.
Correct, right? Like you're just like at the version of whatever they're, yeah. Eating out is something that we're going to be talking about too, like later on in terms of strategies of like how do you stay on track if you are somebody that has to eat out a lot for work or like whatever that looks like. And so we'll be talking about some of those strategies, but the most important tip I can give you on that immediately is the planning part, meaning don't sit down at the restaurant and be like, oh, this is the menu. Like I'm just now deciding. It's like before I go, most likely, even if I'm just in the car on the way there, just like pull the menu up and be thinking about like, okay, I think this is what I'm gonna get, so that you're not like in the moment trying to like, game plan, because that's kind of hard.
Should you change your macros or stick with them?
When you throughout, great question. So I want you to stay consistent. So this is one thing that people will do is they have a tendency to say, especially for females, this comes up I feel like more often, is they'll be like, well, I didn't do anything today, so I'm gonna lower my calories. No, like eat consistently, like eat your target range. Now you might be in that range, that example was like 1700 to 1900. Maybe that day you ate closer to the 1700 mark, but like don't be tempted to be like, well, I'm gonna like eat 1200 because like I didn't. And again, this tends to be more prevalent in female mindsets, but it's like this idea of having to earn your food. And it's like, well, I didn't work out hard enough, or like I didn't like do enough, so like I need to lower my calories. And I want you to stay consistent, because the only way for you to know is that the right range for you is that you need to be consistent, right? To see am I moving toward my goal? But if I'm always moving that target constantly, then it's hard to know what's working and what's not. Does that make sense, Mike? Yes.
Does that go the opposite way too? Say you burn a ton, do CrossFit, you do the bike ride, 10,000 steps. You're like, oh, I'm like, I'm net positive.
Yes.
Like I can beat 800.
So I'm glad you brought that up. So a couple things. One, in MyFitnessPal, oh yes, yeah. So his question was about like if you've like done a lot of extra activity. So again, the example was like I've trained at CrossFit, like I've hit my 10,000 steps, but I've also done like a 2-hour bike ride on top of that. So like I've banked maybe a lot of burned extra calories. Like what do I do with that? A couple of things. So number one, when you set up MyFitnessPal, make sure that you don't have it set up to attach to your watch or your phone, and don't log your activity. Because MyFitnessPal, at its like default setting, will give you back the calories that it thinks you burned from a workout. So it will say like, okay, if my target was 1,700, but it saw on my watch that I burned 450 today, it will give me that extra to eat. And you don't want to do that. Now,
Take it off.
you just make sure it's disconnected. I can show you. You know, and no, you joke. I cannot tell you how many people will say, and they're on this hamster wheel of feeling like, I'm not making any progress. And that's because it's giving you all of those calories back, and you really don't need. The only time I tell people that math doesn't work is if you are truly an endurance athlete and you were training for like a full or a half or some sort of like crazy long endurance bike ride, like yeah, you're gonna need to adjust. But if that is like a rarity in not your day-to-day life, then just stay consistent. Don't give yourself it's that mentality of like, well, I burned 800, so I should be able to go eat 800. Yeah. You don't want to do that. Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. That is a common MyFitnessPal error. I actually should have that on the slide, is the eating their activity back is sometimes what I'll call that. Yeah. Anything else around MyFitnessPal or? Yes, Chris.
So I prefer to save the lion's share of my calories and protein for like my dinner meal, because
Yes.
I have to be rewarded and have something to look forward to.
Yes.
So like my breakfast and my lunch are honestly probably snacks.
Okay.
Is that a problem?
No, it's not. If it works for you, it does not matter. Okay. Nope. It's a good question. There is, sometimes, again, there's these like nutrition myths that get cycled where they'll be like, oh, it's after 8 o'clock. Like, women aren't supposed to eat after 8 o'clock at night. It's like, your body does not know that. Also, I would argue, like, time is relative, not to get meta, but like, your body does not necessarily know you've completed a 24-hour cycle. So, I would tell people, really, if you look at your week, if you have like shifted a little bit here and there, it's really like, where did you net out at the end of the week? You know what I mean? So if you have a day or two that you get a little bit like in the ditch, zoom up a level, and remember, as long as the week comes out and I'm where I need to be, I'm gonna be fine, okay? So that's where we get into that all or nothing of like, well, this day was a mess, and so like, I just give up, I'm gonna like, derail my progress. Your body doesn't really work in this like specific, it's been 24 hours and like calorically store it as fat because it's, hour 23. Like it doesn't know the difference. And so it's really, if you think of it more in a week to week, sometimes that can help your mentality too. All right, Sam.
I might have missed this, but for like fats and carbohydrates,
Yes.
like, is there a good?
What should it be? Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So 99% of people will get the results that they want as long as they hit their caloric target and they get adequate protein. Okay. Carbs and fat can sort of fall where they may. There isn't, unless you are an endurance athlete and you're competing for like a sport where like getting enough, that your macro ratios need to be super dialed in, unless you want to be a bikini competitor and step on stage and be like shredded body fat, like yes, there are sports and times where like dialing in all your macros can be beneficial. The only thing I will say for women is be mindful that you aren't under eating fat. I think the number, and this is, don't quote me, I'll post this in the channel. I think because there are hormone implications for eating too little fat for females. And so I think it's less than 60 grams in a day. But don't quote me, I'll confirm that. But otherwise, it doesn't matter. So just let that fall where it may. It also takes that level of stress out of the equation, right? Because it's like, I'm like 7 grams over on this, but I'm 30 grams under on this. You don't have to worry about that. did I stay in my range calorically and did I hit my protein? If I can do those two things consistently, I'm going to move the needle in the direction that I want to move in. All right, 3 minutes, anything else?
I have just a couple
Yes.
things to wrap up with, if nobody has any more questions. Can I see your mic? More questions? More questions? I was going to do this at the beginning, but I just want to make sure we had time. But just on the next page of your sheet, just want to make sure that you guys know and understand the structure of what the next 4 or 12 weeks is going to look like. Weekly commitments, like Abby said, are action items. And sometimes, especially in this first 4 weeks, we'll tell you what the action item is. When you get into the next 8 weeks, it'll be a little more like, here's a few options based on this educational topic we're talking about. Choose, or you make your own weekly commitment, and then we help keep you accountable to it. And you could also choose additional weekly commitments, like Abby talked about water intake, fruits and vegetables. Like if you want to say, or I'm going to pre-log my food. Abby said she's going to challenge us to do that. But I mean, if you want to say, I'm going to commit this week to pre-log my food 3 times, But that's really, it's an important tool. We wanted to make that something that the ownership is on you for. We're not just telling you every time this is your action item. Group support Zoom calls every Sunday at 4 p.m. Prioritize those as much as possible. That's going to rotate every other week. So today is an educational meeting, is what we're calling it. Next Sunday will be a group support Zoom call, which is that second thing, which is more of just a discussion. It's the coaches are going to ask what's gone well, what are you struggling with, question and answer, and there'll be some more prompts. Like we'll make sure it's not just like chirp chirp. All right, it's over.
It's like small group coaching. So basically, like you will have a chance to like be coached in the moment. It is a chance for us to like support you all, but like it's not new education that's going to be presented in those, and so it'll be that structure will flip back and forth. Yep. So then 2 weeks from today will be the next education call, which John will do on protein, and there will still be some time for Q&A on those, but it'll be more like today, where it's like presenting some information and then some Q&A, and then you'll make a weekly commitment. And then Slack we've talked about. Just make sure you join that. Bookmark those Zoom calls, put it in your calendar. I sent you guys the link, and it's in Slack, like Abby showed you guys. It's pinned right now, all the dates and times, and it's going to be the same link every week for that Zoom call. So you just click that link, bookmark it, and then this schedule and syllabus, first 4 weeks, it's all right there. Not going to go over it. After the first 4 weeks, if you're continuing on for 12 weeks, you can take a look ahead to what some of those topics will be. And I just want to say this as well. We're not going to be, if you're not doing the full 12 weeks, or if there's something coming up like meal planning and prepping or navigating the holidays, and like you have a work event coming up and you're like, oh, well, that's in the second 12 weeks. And I'm going to do, like, we're not going to be stingy with our coaching and knowledge. Like, ask the question. Because really, if you're staying for the next 8 weeks, the value, like what you're paying for is the accountability, the structure, and much more in-depth content. But don't be afraid to ask a question, because it's like, oh, well, they're going to do a topic on that, so I'm just going to have to wait 4 weeks. Go ahead and ask. Yeah. We won't be stingy with knowledge. We want to be generous and help as much as we can. So, and that's easy to just answer questions on Slack and things like that. The other that's thing all I wanted to say. For the education calls, those that are over Zoom, we will record those. So if you were to miss one, or you like want to revisit, or you had to log off early or whatever, the education calls we'll record. The small group coaching calls we won't record, because those are going to be like live in the moment, people sharing stuff, and so we're not going to record those. So just be mindful. If it's content, we'll record it. If it's not, we won't. So just as a heads up. And those will be posted in the Slack channel. The recordings will. Cool. All right, guys. You know your homework. Get on Slack. All right. Bye, guys. Good stuff. Thanks, everybody.